And so, apart from the complex design of endoscopes, there are, of course, other sources of infection transmission through endoscopy. Here, this table, you see inadequate disinfection. So if you don't follow the process of disinfection correctly, then you risk infection. As already mentioned, the complex design of endoscopes or endoscopes that are damaged, and also the washer disinfectors that are contaminated can be a source of transmission. And then also patient-related factors. When you inject the bile duct or the pancreatic duct without draining it, it will be infected. Whenever there is tissue damage of the mucosa, there's a risk of infection, and of course patients with, which are immunocompromised, they're all risks of getting endoscope-related infections. And so far, more than 35 deaths worldwide have been reported that are strictly related to infection transmission through endoscopy. I think the single-use accessory catheters, I think there is no question anymore. We should own catheters, etc. But we're also talking about single-use endoscopes, namely duodenoscopes, which are much more costly. That is one thing. Also, I think you have to take into account the cost, the environmental cost, because we are, as a civilian, we are asked not to use any ear cotton swabs anymore because it's too much plastic and it risks to go into the oceans, etc. But if you look at the plastic disposal from any hospital, and also especially from endoscopy units that we waste every day, it seems to be an enormous problem as compared to the ear swabs, let's say. And another thing is, when you start doing that with endoscopes, as far as I know, Boston has not yet resolved the problem, the environmental problem of the let's say, throw-away duodenoscopes. So that is something that they are still working on. It's not only the cost, because in Belgium, of course, nothing has been taken into account if you work with single-use duodenoscopes. The price will only be the price of a conventional ERCP. So that is something that has not been resolved in Belgium, and that is, of course, a reason why the single-use duodenoscope will be difficult to be used in Belgium. But also, you have to take into account the environmental costs with all these single-use throwaway materials.
Because you might have examined a patient that was infectious but still asymptomatic. Over the past months, several guidelines have been developed, as you can see here. Most of those shown here are guidelines for during the peak of the pandemic. Just to summarize all of them, restrict to urgent procedures during the peak of the pandemic. But obviously, as you can imagine, this might have a huge impact on your population health, and we saw a reduction in procedures that went up to 75%. And if you think further on that, for instance, with this hypothetical experiment that was done in the USA, they suspended all elective endoscopy for 6 months of time, and this led to presumed delayed diagnosis of 22,000 high grades, over 2,800 colorectal cancers, and this led to an increase in the 6 months mortality of these colorectal cancers by about 6.5%. So it has a huge impact on your population, this pandemic. So post-lockdown, and this is a situation that we're still in, it's all about increasing your procedure capacity and keeping in balance the continued infectious risk. So again, for the situation post-lockdown, some guidelines have been developed, and I would just like to highlight this one. If you read one, just read this one. In my opinion, at least, it's the summary of a Delphi consensus amongst endoscopy experts, which gives you excellent advice. And the remainder of the slides that I will show are actually based on this publication as well. So I would just like to highlight. And then last but not least, I would just like to give a shout out to our trainees, everybody that has been in training worldwide, because obviously they have been reoriented to ICU units, emergency units, and this obviously has had an impact on their endoscopic training, as you can see here, and on their psychological and mental well-being as well. So this is just a call for all trainers to actually incorporate the trainees again in a more strict and more rigorous way in the training programs, whilst increasing the procedure capacity again in the endoscopic units. So during COVID-19, the endoscopy room, it's about three things. First of all, stratify the risk and stratify the priority of the procedure. Make sure you work in a safe environment, and this includes PPE, obviously, and protecting your staff. And obviously, there is a slight risk that you have examined a patient that was asymptomatic but infectious, so it is worth the effort, to do post-procedural follow-up.
Good afternoon. Welcome in this session about infection transmission in endoscopy. We have two eminent speakers now. We have Jeroen Geldof from UZ Gent, Tom from Saint-Luc. And he will start with his presentation. So the screen is his.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dominic. And thank you to the organizers for inviting me and to organize this